Hey, what's up, everybody? JB here. It is that time, your favorite time as you're sitting in carpool line listening to this Soccer Dad Pod. Coming in not hot, just predictable. You've read your dashboard. You know who's coming on here. We're going to be talking all things Central Illinois and beyond via the university up there, the MLS Next club up there. And when I say up there, it's not too far up there. It's about, depending on this, how fast you drive, it can be 1 hour, it could be 2 hours from St. Louis, but south of Chicago, right there in the middle. We're going to be talking about that area and all the soccer that's going on there from the club level up to USL2 and beyond. We will get to that in just a second. I am solo today, like in the past, my two cohorts. Those day jobs got in the way, and sometimes you got to get this stuff done during the day because some of our guests, they got their time is precious, so we work around their availability, and here we are. So, quick thank you to everybody that continues to support the show. Again, we don't put a Venmo link out there. There's no GoFundMe. None of us are broke or sick or anything like that. So therefore, when you do support us, it's that simple little like, review, share, follow, all that stuff. Goes a long ways. If you are really wanting to support us, and if you had to choose, apparently the algorithm really loves the reviews, the feedback. So go on Spotify or Apple, click the stars, 1 to 5. We're not asking for 5 stars. We know we are not perfect. 4 is good, probably reasonable. If you give us a 1, give us a good reason in writing as to why it's a 1. And we'll be sure to read it on air so it keeps you coming back no matter what. Anyway, that's my ask for the day. Be sure you go back in time, check out some of the episodes if you've missed. We've had some incredible guests talking about here recently. We've hammered pay to play. We've talked to the Ivy League institution of the Midwest, that being Washington University. The men's staff the other day talking about their upcoming season, D3. They came off an incredible season last year. Fun conversation because they don't have athletic money to give away. So you want to know how they get it done? Well, go take a listen to the episode. And over on Instagram specifically, if you're on the Insta, giving Zucks more of your time and money and energy, be sure to go and support and follow the St. Louis Best 11. You can just go to our page. You'll see us tied to St. Louis Best 11. That is old school team of the week shit that you would read in your local paper, completely not funded, but the data and the players that make these teams are provided to us by the coaches. They all nominate their own player. Then all the coaches get to vote on all the players. And then every Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the fall during the season, here comes the team of the week. It's massive. It's fun. And then I will pick a player from that group somewhat randomly. I try to be fair. I try to be Switzerland. And we'll do a featured player of the week. And you want to really listen to a fun conversation. Not that talking to adults that know what they're talking about isn't fun, but when I interview these kids, it's the first time they've usually been on a microphone. And the brutal honesty is worth the price of admissions. So, St. Louis Best 11 over on Instagram. Give it a follow us, and help support our local high schools, communities, soccer in general. That is my PSA for the day. Therefore, since I don't have my friends here to banter with and make fun of either way, I'm going to just jump straight into my guest today. Joining me, as I mentioned, from up there in the central region of Illinois, Coach Jack Turachnik. Did I pronounce that right, by the way? Turachnik?
JB, congratulations. Not many people get it right on their first try. I don't even think my wife still gets it right consistently enough.
Yeah. Well, she usually calls, hey, you. Hey.
Hey, you with expletives following it.
Hey is your first name. You is your last name. Congratulations. You are in the world of marriage. So, Coach Jack, thanks for joining. Appreciate you taking the time, man.
No, I really appreciate having me on, JB.
So we were, this is kind of a long time coming. This is one of those things. And again, for those of you that are listening, if you've got people in your market that you feel should be on this show, well, that's how this show came about. One of your locals up there Basically sent the email to us. Our email is easily accessible, and said, "Hey, you need to talk to this guy. Doing some cool things up here at multiple levels. Fits the program, and here we are." So appreciate that. First off, for the benefit of our listener, two things. Number one, where are you right now, so they understand exactly where I'm talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm in Springfield, Illinois currently. So kind of, you want me to dive into the background right away, or?
Yeah, you land in Springfield, Illinois. You're not from Springfield, Illinois. And Springfield, Illinois is one of those towns where 99% of the people are from there. And the 1% that aren't from there, there better be a good reason as to why they landed there. You're one of those guys. So where's home? Where's the original birthplace, and where were you raised?
Yeah, amen on that. I just had that conversation about how, even if I've been here for, 15, 17 years, and you're still looked at as an outsider at times. But no, I grew up on the East Coast a little bit in the Maryland, Baltimore area. Then moved out to Naperville. That's where I would say I consider I grew up. And then, I going into my soccer background a little bit, played in the inaugural class of the Chicago Fire Academy. Then from there,
DA, to be clear.
The DA,
right?
Back a couple iterations ago, and then ended up at the University of Illinois Springfield for 4 years. Transitioned into being an assistant coach, which my opinions of the college game now to what it was even 15, 17 years ago, completely different environment.
Yeah.
But had kind of a crossroads into, what I wanted to go to next. Started coaching at a local club in Springfield called SASA, which Springfield Area Soccer Association. Kind of, dug my toe in a little bit with youth soccer. And I honestly fell in love with it. Then, we'll get into the whole CIU thing, but then, I'm still a part of SASA. I wear one of 1,000 hats currently, one of them being, I am still the goalkeeper director at SASA. I am the director of communications / social media at SASA, fundraising at SASA, director of coaching at CIU, and head coach at a USL2 club in Springfield called Springfield FC.
So the CIU is Central Illinois United. Just for the listener, that is an MLS Next program at this point. Do you also play in other tiers, I'm assuming? Do you have any ECNL program, or is it what is it, NAL, or what alphabets other than MLS Next is CIU participating in?
So to paint you a little bit better picture, in the audience a better picture, to describe CIU, it's basically like General Motors. This is the best way I equate it to people. So you might have Buick, you might have Chevy, you might have all these different brands that make up General Motors. Well, CIU is and was basically 3 clubs that came together called SASA, Peoria FC United, and FCCI. The Bloomington, Peoria, and Springfield, Illinois clubs merged basically under one umbrella.
Yeah.
Basically the premise was, back in the history of Springfield soccer, or Peoria soccer, or Bloomington soccer, there's always 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6 really good, talented players that are traveling 6 hours a day in a car.
Yeah.
To Chicago or St. Louis.
Yeah. So for the listeners to kind of, understand what that really means, you're talking about 3 central Illinois towns that are all roughly an hour to an hour and a half apart in a triangle where you don't have enough volume. You don't have a population base to really support kind of what a lot of other metro urban areas are able to do with their MLS Next or ECNL programs. So you guys decided to play nice, filter players, and then, you look to the top. In fact, for those of you that are in St. Louis, 2 names in particular. One, probably the more popular one, Mackay Joyner, was one that was in the, I believe, Bloomington Normal area that played for your club, then moved to Scott Gallagher and immediately was picked up by St. Louis City and signed a homegrown project. So you guys were kind of the first inning of that. And then another player that played with our children, our sons, Bijan Champagne
Yep.
from Peoria area, also was
Yep.
with the club for a little while, and then they went they leapfrogged right over St. Louis and went down to Florida to IMG, then ended up back in St. Louis, etc. So anyway, moral of the story is you guys are working on kind of combining three different populations that if you added them up together, you're probably in the 600, 700,000 population for the whole quote metro area. Is that about right?
Yeah, and then recently we have added two more partner clubs, one being an expansion into the Quad Cities with East Moline. And then the other, we have a partnership with Metro in O'Fallon. It was more of a girls' side partnership up until very recently. It is now expanded once we got into MLS Next under the boys' side as well. So it's 5 current clubs. We're not, I always kind of preface this whenever I'm doing meetings with people or parents or players. We're not trying to be the biggest club. We're trying to be just the best at what we're trying to accomplish. But it has expanded quite a bit in the past year, just in terms of sheer volume of players under the same umbrella.
So let me kind of hit the rewind button just a little bit so that we can add a little bit more context to you and your role in this process. And you said Naperville earlier. Most people know where Naperville is, but for those of you that don't, it's a pretty big suburb right outside of Chicago. So you grew up in the Chicago system. You played with Chicago Fire, in that DA. Your own experience coming out of the DA, because the DA was really the first iteration of what we now know as MLS Next Homegrown, which is Academy, right? Can you take a second and just tell your own, story of pathway? You're coming out of the Fire. You want to play at the next level. What did that look like for you, and why did you end up in Central Illinois?
Yeah, so the whole Fire Academy process to begin, it was such, and I know you know this, JB, but it was such an unknown when the DA was that first initial year. They brought, I'll never forget, they brought the top 2 or 3 teams together. It was at what it was called Toyota Park. It's called SeaGeek now, but they brought them to Toyota Park. We had this, day or two of, training and friendlies. And when the team was selected, Andrew Hopman was the owner of the Chicago Fire at the time. He was there in Chicago / Bridgeview and sat there and just looked at the time it was U16, U18, sat there, looked at us. He goes, I have $500,000 invested into you guys. Don't mess it up. And then basically walked away. And as a kid, a 15, 16-year-old kid who, you're walking into these professional stadiums now and they're telling you basically you're a pro. It's a very intimidating at first atmosphere, but I loved every second of it, loved every minute. I was very fortunate and blessed to be around some of the best coaches in this sport in this country. I was a goalkeeper myself. I had a few different offers around. I remember, talking to my dad. My dad played Division I college football, and I think one thing for me, I was at the Fire. You're competing every day and fighting every day, and they're bringing in new players every single day to potentially take your spot. And I wanted to play all 4 years. I wanted to start right away. And in most of the environments I went to, one of the schools I remember going on Coach Gunn was at Charlotte at the time. I remember going on a visit to Charlotte and having a conversation. And, I wanted to be there. And then I kept hearing, well, maybe compete by your sophomore, junior year. And that ate in the back of my head and just really frustrated me. I felt, there's this huge gravitas and ego that comes with these MLS Academy kids. And I was a part of that, where I was like, oh, what do you mean compete? I'm going to come in and start right away. So I had some offers to go around to Division I, Division II programs. And, I remember coming down to a visit in Springfield, Illinois, and the coach at the time, his name was Chad Jones. And I'll never forget, he goes, I can't get you. I can barely afford you, but here's why I think you will enjoy coming to this program. And he basically sold me on this. You got to build this. You're my guy. You're going to build this program for me. You're that first domino before, they were literally going into their second year of Division II at the time. They were transitioning from NAIA, and I wanted to be a part of building something. I was part of the Fire Academy where we were either the number 2 or number 1 or top 5 program in the country, and I wanted to be a part of something, building something and being a main cog. So that was really alluring to me, and a big reason on why I chose UIS.
Quick break here. Wanted to let everyone know that we have pulled together a special playlist over on Spotify, simply called Soccer Recruiting Playlist. In it, you will find 45 of our episodes featuring a load of D1, D2, D3, JUCO, Academy, and pro coaches, all telling their stories, and most importantly, they talk about pathway, the it factor, what they look for, and what they expect. With over 300 episodes and counting in the show, we thought it was time to help out. Soccer Recruiting Playlist. Find it on Spotify. Back to the show. Your story is one of those things that if you just kind of strip out the details and you look at the fundamental, what's the principle behind it, and this is something that families and players, they really need to ask themselves over and over and over again, whether or not it's when they're looking at a local club, where they're going to go, or even high school versus club. And if you're privileged enough and performing at a level in which colleges are interested, are you going to play? And it's one of those things, like we say it flippantly as if it's well, that's pretty obvious. Well, no, it's not. That's having my own son going through the process, and you're looking at programs where they tell you, the best kids play. That's always the reply. Well, the best players are going to play. Well, what they're really saying is, we really don't expect you to, but over time we hope you can. And are you the kind of player that has the mindset to be able to deal with that? So you go down to Springfield, you play. You come out, you're on the staff. Early on, as you start to become embedded in the neighborhood or in the community. How did you feel? How did you view the market? Because and don't take this the wrong way, but Central Illinois was always kind of a stepchild to Southern Illinois, specifically the St. Louis region, and obviously Chicago to the north. How did you handle the optics of the region, of the locale, in an attempt to engage and grow soccer to the level that you were accustomed to?
That's a great question, JB. I found it very frustrating at first, and from a player perspective, I found it excruciatingly frustrating, and then from a coaching perspective, it was mind-numbingly frustrating, because you're so used to being in this giant pool, whether it be Chicago or wherever else, and then you come to Springfield. And I will say this about the Springfield community: you have to earn their trust. Like, it is not given in a year, 2 years. You have to earn that community's trust, and it's a deep-seated history, and specifically the Springfield, Illinois region, because they were Saginaw United, or not Saginaw State, and they had all these national championships in NAIA, and there's a lot of history, and a lot of those people still lived in the community. And when they went and made that jump to Division II at first, the alumni weren't really bought into that jump, and it was a very difficult transition period when they jumped into Division II. But for me, going from Chicago Fire Academy to Springfield, Illinois, at first it was a little bit humbling. You'd think it'd be more of the opposite. If you go from a Central Illinois market to a Chicago or St. Louis, it'd be humbling. But for me, it was more humbling because they don't care. They don't care where you're from or who you're from. What are you here to accomplish? What are you here for? What are your goals? What are your motivations? They're very weary of, quote unquote outsiders. And being an outsider at first, you come to learn that, it's a very blue collar type town, blue collar type mentality. You have to earn everything that's given to you, and that's respect, that's opportunities, that's everything, and it takes years and years to accomplish that.
Yeah, and the thing is, that region in particular, it's a Friday night lights backyard. High school football is king. Yep. Historically, there was the rare year where, in my years, a Springfield Griffin or High, they might have,
Rochester,
make a little bit of a run. I remember a kid that I played with from Springfield. His name was Adam Shyrock, I believe was his last name. Phenomenal player, national team level, and kind of stayed within that market, never really moved out of the market. And he's the kind of kid that, you guys historically, up until the point you're at now, would have farmed out to a Scott Gallagher, to a Chicago Sockers, et cetera. But you're now starting to keep them a little bit longer. And obviously the intent, I have to assume, is you want these teams to really kind of gel, run, and start to, because a lot of smaller clubs, and I want to get your take on this. Mm-hmm. If they do it right, you can see a lot of parity at U10, 11, 12, 13 even. And then even if you're doing it right, what happens at 14, 15, 16 and above, you start to get through puberty, you start to see the true athleticism present itself and the demand for ROI from the player, from the parents. Where is, CIU, I'm just going to say CIU from now on. Where is CIU kind of in that growth pattern? Do you feel comfortable in keeping what are true one percenters or potentially one percenters? Is the club at a point at the older ages to produce and perform for those players?
Yeah, I'd say the growth maturation process of CIU, it's a very complicated one to explain, so I'll do my best. But I'd say the last 3 to 4 years, more specifically on the boys' side, because our girls' side, they had a partnership with Eclipse. They got an East County Regional League bid. They had some success. Then they got into the Girls Academy, which is a national platform, which is great. But the boys never had a true national platform up until this past, recently, last few months, getting into MLS Next. But we were in this, and previously we had somebody helping us out that was a part. His name was Mike Makovich. He's the current Chicago Fire 2 head coach. He was before he took on that role, he was pretty involved with us. He helped us in terms of, here's how you got to train. Here's how you have to have your organization. Here's what you have to do with facilities. Here's what you have to do with uniforms. He basically laid out the plan for us in Central Illinois of, he basically created the Chicago Magic and helped, them to become what they were. And he's a professional coach. He was with the U.S. Youth National teams. He was with about half a dozen MLS Next MLS clubs as an assistant coach. He's now in a MLS Next Pro head coach, and I still have a good relationship with him today. But we were unfortunately, and we have to win. We had to win to prove that we belong. It is JB. It's a difficult. I just had this conversation with the guy that basically was the founder of CIU. I have so much appreciation and love for those players that were early on CIU players, because it was development by fire, development by winning. It's almost this whole, and I know this is going to make some people chuckle because it's such an extreme comparison, but it's almost this Argentina-esque, like you have to fight, and we're building something. We are trying to prove that we belong. We're trying to win to show that we deserve these eyeballs, deserve these looks. So it's this weird, toxic / not toxic thought process, depending on how you feel about development versus winning.
Well, I tell you what, hearing you say, because it just kind of clicked for me. For a club like CIU to get to the MLS Next platform, to get the girls to the GA platform, et cetera, you go through a pro-rel process. Then once you're in the, get through the golden gates and you get the patch and the letters, right? All of a sudden the pro-rel reality or the expectation isn't there anymore. You've summited and now you're in. And I think MLS Next, and I've heard through the grapevine that they're starting to, okay, we know we need to grow. And and for the listener, the reason why the league needs to grow isn't what you think it is. Well, maybe a little bit. Is it about the money? Sure. All businesses want to grow. But if you do not grow, then one of the easiest ways to manage the cost in a league like this is to try to mitigate and reduce travel and yet still keep the level high. One of the, in our episode a couple episodes ago, Steve Tritchue said it himself. He's like, one of the reasons that Midwest region is more expensive than some other regions at the MLS Next level is we do not have enough teams in the region to keep travel light. As, compared to if you're in New York, you can drive 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half in any direction, and you're going to stumble across 2, 3, 4 MLS Next academies. Well, that's not the case here in the Midwest. So I'm going off on a tangent here. I'm going to get back to CIU, and my question to you is, now that you guys are in, what's the mission statement?
Now for me, it's very much focused on, I had this conversation with my coaching staff, but we've always kind of been on 2-year blocks, where the first year, so we were in. 4 years ago, we were in Midwest Conference, and we were having teams in Prem 2 fighting to get into Prem 1. We only had 3 teams, make it to Prem 1. So we were in this like true pro rel, promotion relegation Midwest Conference, and my U13s might be in Minnesota, and our U15s might be in Ohio or Michigan for U18. It was a disaster. It was such a grind in those days where we had to prove ourselves that we could get into, whatever national platform. So we got into what was called E64, Elite 64, which I can go on a long tangent about that. But long story short, we were lucky enough that first year to get into a really good division. It was us, it was Galaxy, it was Libertyville, it was Toca, it was Sporting Blue Valley, it was Madison 56ers, it was Elmbrook, really good clubs. Like all their top teams at these clubs, it was great competition. It was great for us, but it was a learning curve because it was our first time playing that consistent of competition, club v club. So we did okay across the board. We didn't do terrible. I'd say, anywhere from third to fourth place was an average of where we were. Some teams did better, some teams did worse. But it was an acclimation period for us, getting used to that day in, day out competition. You're not playing the 4-0 game and then you're playing the 6-0 game law. It was a little bit more of a grind. The second year they had teams leave for MLS Next. We kind of across the board did very, very well. I'm gonna say, to make a short story long, we're in another 2-year cycle now in terms of our first year in MLS Next. It's going to be an acclimation period for us for 1 year, for our players to get used to the grind, to get used to the competition, to get used to all the expectations, to get used to the technical standards that they have in terms of variance between U13 is completely different in MLS Next than it is in some other leagues. They shorten the fields, got a smaller ball. So there's going to be a 1-year acclimation and player development period for us. And then I expect us, like we have in the last 6 years, that second year, we're going to take a bigger step forward in terms of how we train.
So let me cut in here. Let me add some questions to this line of conversation here. In managing parent expectations moving forward, or maybe the mission statement of the club, because now that you are in the quote the top league, MLS Next, for your boys' side in particular, in order to get there, you said it yourself, you had to earn your way in. By earning your way in, what that means to me, if I'm reading between the lines, is you've had groups of kids that have probably played together for a while that have been really good, that have won a lot of games, right? And all of these kids, their dream, all kids will say, I want to be a pro, right? And they view this pathway, MLS Next, as the next step. Once you guys get in, and I don't want to make any predictions, but I think you're a reasonable guy because you've been around the game a long time. It's not going to be easy. Families that are used to a 15-0, 14-1 season, you're going to start to see 500 numbers, maybe even worse, because I've seen it for these new clubs that come in, and there's a mindset and an expectation. So what's your plan, or what has been your conversation or your messaging to the families within your market that are in the club as to what to expect. What is the trade-off going from top of the pile to, again, I don't want to make any assumptions, but if you're mid down and the record is reflective of that, what's the pitch?
I'll give you a perfect example and then my personal opinion. So our girls' academy, this past year, they were put in a different division. They were put with Sockers and all the Chicago area teams and Wisconsin area. They were put in a brutal conference, our girls' academy. And the conversation at the parent meeting from our director, Drew Linhart, who does a really good job, basically was like, hey, we're not going to win. We aren't going to win. We need to compete, and our goal should be mid-table. And parents, and like you said, it's a challenge. But one thing that I do think we have a lot of parents that understand the game, that understand what we're trying to accomplish in terms of, if we're going to say we're about player development, now this is our chance to prove it. This is our opportunity to, we truly now, now kind of, you said it, we've landed in MLS Next. Now we have to develop players, and now we have to continue to improve and make little improvements, whether it be, our technical and market training days, whether it be our game model. So I'll give you an example. I'm changing currently our game model because the game model we had previously can't go into MLS Next for the level of competition we're going to have,
Right.
Day in, day out. So what we had previously is changing now to, I'd say, a little bit more of a defensive to attacking game model, where we're trying to create more field tilt in the final third. And we're going to focus a little bit more on pressing. We're going to focus a little more on box defending. We're going to focus more on our mid block and when, which triggers and what to do X, Y, and Z. And not to, go into too much detail about that, but we have to change. We have to change our philosophy. We're not going to be the big bad, team in the division. We're not going to be that.
So is the change targeted at making sure that the club and the teams can compete, or are you making the change to focus on player development because you've seen at the higher level low block teams, high press in the front third, repress in the middle, and then get conservative in the back? We see it over and over and over again. Now, part of that is a lot of people will say, well, that's why U.S. soccer struggles, is it's kind of boring, in a sense. So are you cognizant, and how, are you preparing to protect the team, or are you implementing a system that you think will get more players to the next level? Or is it some combination of both? How would you weight that out?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a combination of both. I'd say for U13, U14, it's a way more broad and generalized curriculum and game model. It's not like, I'll be honest, and it sometimes frustrates even our coaches that I don't care about winning at U13, U14. I just don't. I don't think any college coach, I don't think any professional coach has ever cared about how you do at U13, U14. So to me, I put everybody in, I rotate people, they got to try different positions. If we basically have, I'm about to, it's, ironic timing, this Sunday, going to kind of run through it with my staff, the implemented new game model. It's basically got 10 and a half, I would say, parts to it. And it's changing for two reasons. One, I've seen the deficiencies. Now that's my third year as going into director of the club. I've seen the deficiencies of our players and where we have to improve. And then second, to get them to compete at a higher level, we have to improve in about 3 or 4 massive areas. So I think it's twofold. One, to get them to compete at the higher level, because I've seen it, whether I've been coaching at a youth level or a high level youth level, an elite level like CIU, MLS Next, or the semi-professional level or the college level, whatever it is, different levels require different things in terms of player development. And the biggest thing that, I truly think is separating the game model between and your expectations with U13, U14 and the high school ages. High school ages, we're trying to compete. All right, we're trying to win. We're trying to compete. U13, U14, and until they hit that full puberty matrix, it's not. You don't know what a player is going to be. I got a player in my U13s that I coach his older brother too, and he's had trials with St. Louis City, but he's the size of me, so he's hit full puberty. He's going to go into this year. He's going to rule. He's a good player, comes from a good family, but what's he going to be at U15, U16, U7? I don't know.
Well,
so maybe he's going to dominate at a 9,
but
he might be a 4 or 5 at the next level.
Let me ask you a question along those lines, because we've seen it over and over and over again, and these are the key words, the hot words, the fun words that you'll hear from pundits and clubs, that being player profile. We're looking for a profile in a 10 or a CB or whatever. And, what really frustrates me is you don't hear a lot of these individuals talking about like soccer IQ. It's not, just
decision making.
Yeah, exactly. So here's my question. I just wanted to point that out. My question is going back to, you talked about 13 and 14. You don't care about winning. Let me run a quick parallel and see where your position is on this. I know a lot of other clubs that are at this level that, looking at the staffs, they strategically often put what is arguably their best staff from a coaching / development standpoint at 12, 13, 14. There are good coaches at the top that are strategic, good coaches. But it's not a coincidence that certain staff members are at those younger ages. What is the CIU model? How do you view that? I kind of set up the answer to the question, I'm assuming, but talk a little bit about how you view the value of younger players and the staff that you have.
So my opinion, so our oldest teams, so I'd say our U17, U18 team, the college coaches. So one is Colin Nelson, who's at he's the head coach at Eureka College, and then the other one is Ben Messina, former head college coach. He was all over the place, but he's had a really good career as well in terms of the college level. And then for me, I coach, like you said, I coach the youngest teams. And then our U13 coach is Daniel Smallwood. I assist on that team, but he has got his dad coached an academy over in Europe. He actually has a side business, and he helps develop curriculum for EPL clubs that are starting to try and branch out women's academy teams. So he's got an extensive background, very qualified, does a good job. So me and Daniel technically do all the youngest teams because they're the most important to get your hands on throughout an entire fall, winter, and spring. So and then as they get older, I think we transition them a bit more. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm better than these guys that do college coaching, and they're not as no, because they're fantastic coaches. They do an awesome job. I respect the hell out of those guys. But in terms of, they need a different environment when they're 17, 18. They need a little bit more blunt and tough love than 13, 14.
The other thing.
The term staycation was really invented by soccer moms. Located 1 hour and 7 minutes from the Arch, the Music Box Chalet at Innsbruck is a hidden gem. Buried in 3 acres of private woods, the Music Box has a master suite for just you, a loft and second bath for them, and a vinyl collection to meet your every mood. The full-size kitchen will easily accommodate 3 to 12 bottles of rosé, while the huge fire pit seating area will keep the big kids busy. Golf, fishing, kayaking, pickleball, or simply reading a book with Mother Nature, all at your fingertips. Visit either VRBO or Airbnb to find the Music Box Chalet. And now, back to those guys.
The other thing is there's a certain amount of human reality when it comes to coaches too. Frankly, I experienced it with my own kids. I could not coach them at a young age. I just didn't have the demeanor to do that. The empathy is even as their dad. That just wasn't me. I always joked with my wife because she's like, "You need to coach more." I'm like, "They're not old enough because they'll still cry." It's kind of that. And so I just kind of wanted to bring that into the mix, in so much that college coaches at 17, 18, that makes sense, because that's a good experience for the kids to understand, this is what I would be walking into. This is the kind of coach or the mentality. Let me ask you strategically then, as far as the goal for the club, outside of the obvious. I mean, you guys want to put out good teams. You want to have a good reputation. You want to create a culture. What is your thought, or what is your goal when it comes to player development and pathway? Do you have silos that you're looking to fill? That being, college pathway. That being, at the younger ages, are you looking at MLS academies? Do you want to create those relationships to get them to an RSL or get them to a Philly, Chicago Fire, whatever? And even beyond, like what's the strategy there? How do you view it for the goal for where you want the kids to go?
So I'll start from the base of it. So the base of our whole pathway is our rec programs across all the clubs. So SASA's got a massive rec program, thousands of kids in it in Springfield, Illinois. Bloomington's got a massive PCSL rec program. Peoria is growing there. There's other rec programs as well. Then those feed into SASA, PFCU, FCCI, etc., into their competitive teams. And then from there, so CIU starts U11 winter. So actually, we're, for the first time ever, going to do some U11 stuff. The Chicago Fire Academy invited us up in a few weeks from now, actually, to participate in like a Discovery Center type event. And we're bringing in a group of selected U11s just to kind of, hey, let's evaluate them. Let's see where they're at. If anyone has any interest in them, depending on where the unfortunate thing is, depending on where they live, that's also another really crappy MLS rule where only certain kids can get called in based on their age until they hit U14 spring. But we're basically, it's our pre-academy is U11 and U12. They train in market. We have in-market training, so they get to train alongside our older players. So you go to the closest location to you, and it is small-sided technical training, SAQ. And that's our in-market day, and then our Wednesday, Thursdays are our game model days. But our younger pre-academy kids get exposed to some of the older kids they look up to and get to train and get to push themselves. U13 is when they go full-time. So I would say from there, when we have a full-time CIU player, the pathway from there is very divergent in terms of what are our goals player developmentally. So one, for a U13 kid, I want, if our top player, go to Fire City. Let's get them trials. Let's get them exposed to those environments. If you're good enough for Chicago Fire Academy, if you're good enough for St. Louis City, I'll call Sean Hewitt, or Sean Hewitt will come and look at players, or I'll call Cole Bouchou at Fire and come look at play. I want our players to have those opportunities. Those are the next levels for those kids. Now, you get to U15, U16, U17, U18. If you're not good enough by that age, it's more difficult to break into those academy groups, especially now. Look at Fire Academy; they're signing guys. It's 3-year deals. I mean, everything's a 3-year deal. So it's more difficult to break into that. Now, can we get them trials and exposed and get them a little bit more promotion? Sure.
Let me ask you a hypothetical question, since this is a soccer podcast with no rules. Do you think that this do or die threshold at that 14, the 13, 14 age, and then anything above that, a lot of programs start to diminish value or think, I don't know. Do you think we're putting that Mendoza line too low? Because we just kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. That is puberty. That is full growth. That is, speed, muscle mass, etc. And also time for your brain to catch up, soccer IQ. Because what often happens, and we don't even know these kids exist, they come into a market where there isn't a pathway to an academy team or a GA, whatever, and they have it baked into them. But because nobody's ever seen them, and maybe it's not until 15 or 16 in which, oh my God, we saw them as a freshman in high school. Now we need them on our MLS Next team over here. That's at a line in an age in which a lot of clubs, based on profile and statistics or Moneyball, will say, no, it's not going to happen, right? Do you think we as U.S. soccer as a whole, do you think we're just putting that Mendoza line too far down, that we should start to move it up, because we don't know when somebody's going to truly break out or break through? Because I've seen kids in the span of 2-3 months grow 4 inches, get faster, get stronger, and get smarter, right? How do you view that?
I'll go a step further. So my cousin was a big baseball player in high school. He's 5'11". He went to a Division III school in Virginia. He grew 6 inches his freshman year. Late late developer, ended up being a pitcher for a Division I program. Now, on the soccer side of it, I actually think MLS Academy teams should be having 2 or 3 teams per age group. I don't think they have enough. I'm the rare. I don't think there's enough teams for those pro academy levels. Have 2 or 3. Look at, I know we talked, offline about, but I just came back from Barcelona. They have multitude of levels, multitude of teams per age group in those pro academies. I think our pro academies. Now I understand. All right, I know we're in a dream world. If all these teams could have 3 teams per age group, yeah, sure. But who's gonna pay? Who wants to pay for that in this country? Nobody.
Yeah.
So those kids are getting left behind. Like you said, the Mendoza line is way too low. But yeah, I think and then there's this whole weird dynamic of by 15 or 16 now these academies are deciding, hey, you're going to be a pro and you're not. You're on the pro pathway for us and you're not.
So let me ask maybe the goal or the target for you as you look at your teams, your older teams in particular. If and you just stated it, and I know it to be true too, that the MLS academies and the true pro academies, they start to diminish their scouting once you hit 15, 16, especially 17 and beyond. Given that's the case, then what's the real focus for the kids that are older in your club? From a play/development standpoint? Is it to help them with college? Is it just to keep it at an elevated level? Because the age-old debate, especially in our backyards, is club versus high school. Because if they're going to play at club, MLS Next rule is real simple. You can't do both. And that's something that the people in your market have grown up, that's all they know. So now there's going to come a point where a decision needs to be made. How are you, what is the goal, and how are you communicating through club versus high school?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that, like you said, U13, U14, if we can push any of those players to MLS academies, but U15 and above, our goal at CIU for our teams is 100% college commitment percentages across our boys and girls teams. I think our girls teams last year had 10 Division I commitments. Just on our girls side alone, I think they really had a really good year. We had a couple Division I boys players. We just had 2 commit in the past couple of weeks to UIC and NIU. But to me, it's not necessarily about Division I, but it's just about putting them in college programs. We are the program that if you want to play at the next level, come here, develop, play, compete, and we will get you into I always say, whatever level player you are, we will place you in that level of a program. If you're a Division I player, we can get you the exposure for a Division I player. If you're a Division II player, we can get you the exposure for Division II, Division III, NAI, JUCO, whatever it may be. Now there's this next tier, and it's a weird, thing for a high school age player, but this USL2, because we have 2 USL2 clubs in Central Illinois. We have Peoria City, we got Springfield FC, which I'm the head coach of. I've seen the benefit now of, having players, the top 17, 18-year-old players in the area training or being on the team at a USL2 level. I know 2 players in my club, Jackson Orris, who just committed to NIU, John Jasker just committed to UIC. Their coaches that gave them the offers were like, they love the fact that they were training with, I had, 4 kids from SLU this past year, then NIU and Louisville and all these other Division I, II, and NIA, JUCO. They want their players in those environments training. So there's multitude of pathways. They diverge. They go all across. Every player has a different end game, a different target, a different level. So I can't say this is the one end game for this player. Every player has a different journey. Every player has a different end product. So I'll give you a perfect example. I got a kid he's 17. He's on our CIU oldest team for next year. He played for me at Springfield FC. He actually started 1 game. I want more of this type of player in my club or just in general in this youth landscape. He went one day, he's training 4 days or 4 times a day some days in the summer. He was working. He would go to an ID camp, come back, and start and play 90 minutes for a USL2 game. That's unheard of in today's world. Like those blue-collar, tough players. But, a player like that player can play at a high level. He's willing to suffer. He's willing to sacrifice. There's the young player in this world, they're not willing to suffer. They're just not.
So my favorite question of all time is the it factor. And given your description of this 17-year-old, take a second and talk about, through your own lens, your own taste, because everybody's a little bit different, but they all typically answer in the same vein. When you go, whether it's on your team or opposing team, or you're just, whether you're scouting or you're just watching a game for fun, specifically at the younger ages, I'm talking teens, mid-teens to 16, 17. When you see a kid that has it in your eyes, what does that look like? What is that it factor that differentiates them from your perspective?
I'll give you two mental type things and then one soccer specific one. The number one thing for me is passion. I'm a very passionate guy. I think, part of the reason that CIU has grown to where it is today is because we have people in the club that care. I don't have current kids. I know every single player in the club. I know first, last name, where they're from. I know what positions. I know a little bit about them. I try to build relationships with every single player. I care about every single player. And I think passion. If you don't love what you're doing, if you don't care about what you're doing, then that to me is almost a non-negotiable in terms of that's the player I want. I want you to care. I want you to care about your teammates. I want you to care. The BS answer. I want you to care about your club, but I do. I've been with this club a decent amount of time, whether it be SASA or CIU or, now Springfield FC. You got to care about it. You got to care about your teammates. You got to care about what you're doing. You got to care about the results. You got to care about training. You got to care about the little things, how you treat each other. So one is passion. The second to me is toughness. And toughness means two different things: physical toughness but the mental toughness of suffering. The only reason I keep saying the suffering thing, I remember a pro coach talking a few months ago. I was talking to him, and he was basically saying, these kids nowadays don't know what it means to suffer, to live on sofas, to live and go on trials in foreign countries and come back a little bit more veteran and take coaching and take criticism and be in different environments and being able to play different positions. Toughness can be a very generalized topic, but to me, are you willing to fight through adversity? A lot of young players just aren't very tough. I try and, say at least, I think we've built a pretty tough culture just because we've had to come from nothing to get to where we are today. And we still, have a lot, more ambition to continue to getting better from players and coaches and everything. But toughness would be the second. And then the third for me, I know you talked about game IQ and all that, but to me, speed of play. I want to see your speed of play. Are your eyes always looking forward? I don't care if you're a center back looking to break lines. I don't care if you're a fullback looking to get forward. I don't care if you're a 6 or 8 or 10 or 9, 7. Are your eyes forwards? Are you looking forwards? I want to look at your eyes. Are you looking forwards? Always. I want players that want to go to goal. So I'd say those three things. I'd say kind of put them all together into one. But yeah, passion, toughness, and then the third is for me, are you making quick decisions on the ball, and are you going forwards on the ball if you can?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that it seems so simplistic, but the reality is, until you've watched thousands and thousands of games, minutes, etc., you see it. You know it when you see it. And the problem is Instagram highlights the tricky double tap nutmeg from a kid that is soft as shit. I mean, that's the disconnect. Well, you've mentioned it a couple times. Springfield FC, you guys are part of USL2. USL as a league is just really ramping up on all fronts at the top down. Talk a little bit about the team, the why. To bring it into market and kind of what the relationship is of Springfield FC via the USL2 to SASA to CIU, because I can pick up what you're laying down here. You've created a triangle, pyramid. Excuse me, it's a pyramid. What's the role of Springfield FC? Tell us a little bit about the team.
Yeah, so this was our second year in the USL2, and we knew, going into it. that it's going to be a journey. You know, basically there's like a 5-year plan in place where you have to have a lot. You got to get a lot right to have success, and not much of it is about on the field. So I'd say, you know, the biggest thing that it does is it does create this pyramid. It does give players, whether it be in high school, high level, you know, MLS Next or ECNL players, opportunities, and it gives the college players opportunities to get exposure. So I'll give you an example. There's, you know, last summer we had a kid, Andrew Gerber, that came in, a Brazilian/French kid, really, really talented center back, got some film with us, and then got an opportunity to go trial with Fort Wayne, and then he ended up signing a pro contract over in Spain for a third division team. But like the USL2, for those that are unfamiliar with it, it's basically the lowest. What would you say, JB? The lowest tier of pro soccer in this country, semi-professional soccer in this country.
I think. Well, here's how I would describe it, and I would describe it specifically through a particular team, and that being Vermont Green, who just won the USL2 championship. We had the privilege during my son's visit to Vermont. We watched one of the games, met a little bit of the staff, looked at the roster. You look at the roster; it's a who's who of players from North Carolina, Duke, Princeton, etc. Yeah. You look at the quality of the play and where these players are going. I would say USL2, when done right, is very, very high level. You know, if you're thinking in terms of Division I soccer, we're talking RPI top 10. For the teams that are really pulling it off, and then it goes down a little bit, and that's just law of averages and numbers, but. It's men, it's pros, it's, and for those players that are younger, like your 17-year-old in market, this is where if you are a kid that has potential, if you really think you're going to the next level, you will never know until you test yourself in the next level.
And then look at, 20 of the top 30 draft selections in the MLS last year had USL2 experience. I think a majority of the MLS draft draftees have USL2 experience. So the league itself it's a very high level for us. And I'm gonna say something, and you're probably gonna laugh, but to me, the way I view it, it's almost Barcelona-esque in terms of 11 players from the academy are on the first team at Barcelona. We need to have a pathway within Central Illinois, and whether they're playing at Springfield FC or Peoria City. But for us, like, we need players from our local markets to develop and be able to compete at that level. That's how you develop a culture over time. We're only 2 years in. We're still building our culture. I wish I could sit here. I think CIU has a little bit more established culture. Frank's the owner of Springfield FC. He'd be the first one to admit, hey, we're still developing this. We're still working on this. We're still trying to get this going. And one way to truly establish a culture is if you have these local kids, and I'm not saying local within, 5 miles. I'm saying within, a couple hours. If you have these kids grow up and have exposure in there, maybe they're training at 17 and then 18, and then they go to college and maybe they're at CIU or Bradley or wherever. And then they have 4 years. You're talking 6 years of caring about a club. And now you're starting to develop that culture. So it's a build out. It's not going to happen overnight. You got to increase, your sponsorship money. You got to host more players. You have to have more things for the players. You got to help them find jobs in the summer. There's a million things behind the scenes that go into USL2 in terms of that semi-professional level. But for me, it's like you said, we're creating a pathway here in Central Illinois for these players to, and they love saying it, especially the younger ones, like they're so prideful when they do get a train or play, like I'm playing semi-pro. Well, and if you look at the level, it is semi-pro.
Yeah, no, and I think the one thing USL2 is doing really, really, what it's doing really well at is if you really look at the league and you look at the teams over the past 2, 3, 4 years that have thrived, there is a direct correlation between the proximity to either top tier Division I universities in those markets, i.e., all throughout the ACC. There's a lot of very good USL2 teams in the ACC region, I should say. Vermont Green is a perfect example. You have a national championship national championship team 2 years ago, and by the way, the same stadium hosts 2 years in a row USL2 champs. But then you also have the USL markets that are doing really well. Charlotte, Vegas, places like that, where their two teams are really starting to pick up speed. And that is the true parallel between, La Liga reference. You've talked about Barcelona a couple times. That's the culture. That's what breeds the culture. That's the system that leads to the culture. So I think it's great, because for you guys, I remember whenever the announcement came out that you picked up the 4 kids from SLU, when, we knew all of them. And it's like, that's pretty smart, because you're going to have a whole bunch of kids in the Springfield area that might be coming out. The kids are in the club. The parents are paying for the club. And all of a sudden they look at the roster and it's like, oh, shit, SLU, yeah, they've won a lot of national championships. I would love my kid to go there. That's how that's how loyalty is built. So kudos. That again, I went off on another soapbox there.
No, you're good.
No, so USL2, where you guys play, where are those games being played?
So currently at SHG High School in Springfield, Illinois, we are in the process of trying to get all of our home matches shifted over to the Shields Sports Park. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a pretty brand new facility.
Yeah.
Like a $70 million facility, includes the biggest air inflated bubble in the world, a ton of turf field. We're trying. That's one of the main goals for us for next year is to shift those games over there. There's certain parameters that we have to get figured out. You have to have locker rooms in a certain proximity, and there's how it is. You have to hit the hosting benchmarks for that. But in terms of environment for us, we really want that to be our home field because, and ironically enough, you can sell beer, and that brings out fans.
Oh, that's huge. I mean, like.
Yeah,
we say that flippantly, but the reality is, because pay to play exists. If you want to offset costs, and USL2 wants to become effective, it has to be an experience. And middle-aged Xers and millennials that love the game, you know what? If we have to go to high school and we can't drink, I got to be honest, like that's a check against. That's how pathetic I am, though. So,
but I hear, and I have to hear from my friends. So my friends come to the game, and then what I hear the first thing after the game. It's not what I thought about this player, this player, this player, this player. It's you guys got to sell beer. You guys got to sell beer.
Well, it's just one of those things because soccer is the 4th or 5th, most valued sport in America, in spite of participation rates, right? To get the average common potential fan, you have to provide them with things that they are absolutely used to getting in all the other sports they love, and it's experience. And unfortunately, the reality is it's hot dogs and Busch Light.
I was talking to a buddy who helps out with a club in the East Coast in Florida. And he was saying that before they were able to sell beer at their concessions, they averaged about 220 fans per game. After it was in the 700s. Yeah.
Well, Vermont Green. I'm going to mention them again because this is what we were told by the staff there. That stadium that they play in is the same stadium as the university, and it's 3,500 seats, I believe. They have 7,000 season ticket holders.
Incredible.
And they sell beer.
Incredible. Incredible.
So the math is 3,500 seats, 7,000 season ticket holders. They all rotated out, and beer is accessible. And
can you imagine the environment? If that was in your backyard, you're going to every game.
Yeah, and Springfield is very similar in so much that when you think of Burlington, Vermont, there are no professional sports there. There's no NFL, there's no NBA, there's no NHL, right? You're kind of on an island, and soccer is valued there. Springfield, Illinois. There are no professional sports teams there. You have some minor league stuff in the region, but soccer is the fastest growing sport amongst our children, right? And you can make it work. So best of luck with that.
Credit to all the owners of those USL2 teams. I know they're all taking a huge risk. A lot of them, not many of them are very profitable. So, I credit to all those owners that put their money where their mouth is and are trying to grow the game and trying to put something in these communities to grow. Jack
Turachnik. I think I got it right both times there. Well, thank you very much for joining me, man. I really, this has been a lot of fun. So many layers of things that you're working on there that, kind of reflect the community at the grassroots level through SASA, and then obviously you've elevated the play in the club environment. And then USL2 is just kind of the like cherry on the top if we're thinking about kind of a vertical run. You guys got a lot going on, and it sounds like it's firing on maybe not all cylinders yet, but enough to get to be moving at pace. Am I close?
Yes, I would agree. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go.
Well, congratulations on all of the process and the progress up to this point. We'll be following, keeping in touch. Obviously, with the two team, because I know you love those St. Louis players. You're like, if you're going to build a team that's going to win in the Midwest, you need St. Louis players. So
I loved those guys. And a lot of them had St. Louis City 2 experience as well. And I was actually listening to one of your former podcasts, and you or your co-host was making fun of how every college coach talks about culture. Well, I'll tell you this: at SLU, they got a culture.
Yeah.
You can probably make that joke about a lot of different, but SLU with Kalish, I mean, he makes their players take personality. They have a culture. They have a culture, and those kids work.
Yeah, it's one of those things at SLU. When they have a home game and you have the alumni tent and you can count national team caps, in the tent, you better get the culture right.
Talk about stress as a coach. I'm not a big stressful one, but if you have 100 of those alumni sitting there at a tent watching a game, nitpicking every little thing, I mean, God.
It's fun. It's a good problem to have. Well,
a great one.
Well, congratulations on everything, Jack. Really look forward to keeping in touch. I'll be sure to put a link to I'll put the club link in the show notes if anybody wants to go check it out. If you're in Central Illinois and you're curious, hit them up. I'm sure they'll have the conversation or answer the questions. Until next time, JB here, Soccer Dad Pod. You know the deal. Like, review, follow, share, all free. That low self-esteem thing we have, that helps bump it up a little bit. We're out of here. We'll catch you next time.